Here's what's coming up on episode 62 of the Big Séance podcast. Yosiell Lorenzo. I'm so excited to have you, my first artist. I feel like I'm becoming a real podcast now. I'm branching out and getting people from all over.
Growing up, a lot has to do with my mom. She was, not so much now, but back then she was really into the supernatural, the occult. She was really into Santero, which is a religion. So she took me to, I guess, what's equivalent to like a spiritualist party from the Victorian era. Yeah, a lot of my Sickling stuff was definitely inspired by like Dark Crystal and the Labyrinth and all the Jim
Oh my
Henson stuff.
Gosh, I was totally going to mention that later on. That's what I feel when I see those.
So I think when I first started illustrating anything that has, I guess, a solid eye, pupil or whatever, they're humans. And I started going more into like the kind of ghostly world. And that's when their eyes change, which is just solid white with like one little dot for the pupil. So in my illustrations, that's how you can tell a spirit between a human. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay. Yeah, wow. Kids are super observant. Wow.
Do you have an idea of how many paranerds right now are freaking out with excitement about both of those things that you just said right there?
Yeah, I hope so, yeah.
What's Halloween like for you?
Magical.
Welcome to the Big Séance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the Séance. Hey there. I hope you're having a great week. Hey, have you seen this new show, Hollywood Medium? I say new show because I only discovered it last week, but it first aired in January, and the whole first season is actually over. It's on the E! Network, and I've been watching episodes on demand. It's already been renewed for a second season, and that airs on August 7th, 2016. So let me tell you about this show. Even though I love it, I think it has a horrible name. Hollywood Medium just makes it sound kind of tacky to me for some reason, but this show really isn't that at all. The Hollywood Medium is this squeaky clean 19-year-old kid named Tyler Henry, though he's actually 20 by now. He has an assistant, or sometimes his mother, I've noticed, who drives him to about 3 new clients per episode. And these clients are various Hollywood names, mostly B-list personalities, or at least stars that aren't really in the spotlight anymore, honestly. But there are a few big names in there. And supposedly his manager texts the address to the next client, to whoever is driving him, and neither are aware of who the client is. So when he is greeted at the door by the client, it's actually a surprise. And what's funny is that most of the time, he doesn't recognize them anyway because he's so young. For instance, he didn't recognize Boy George or the Lawrence brothers or Tracy Gold. You know, these are artists or actors from the 80s for the most part. But the cool thing is that he picks up messages in the car on the way and then can usually validate them or put 2 and 2 together once he's invited in by the client. This kid, Tyler, is so sweet and friendly and just seems so real and honest. I've seen opinions out there that say they see it as all being very fake and kind of the opposite as I see it, but I don't get that at all. He's young and hip and seems to have some serious abilities. Every episode has me close to tears. And I know that just like any reality show, there could be, you know, this element of things being produced or scripted and staged. And I get that. And I've been very critical. You've heard me be critical of that. But there's just something about how the producers have put this show together. It's just so pleasing to the ear and the eye. Maybe that sounds cheesy, but seriously, the graphics and the music, the lighting, the way it's filmed, I just love it. I know there are other psychic shows out there, and they're okay. I just don't always love them or resonate with them. But I am loving the Hollywood medium. So, why am I telling you this? Well, first, it's because it's on my mind. I'm in love with this show and have been watching it every chance I can get for I think a week and a half now. So I'm curious to know if you have been watching and what you think. I know a few of you have been watching because I've been talking to you about it. And it's come at a time when I've really decided that some of my old standby paranormal shows, the two oldies that I've watched forever, I think it's time to cut the cord on those. I'm really thinking about that. Some of you may know why, and it's not necessarily important here, but I think it's time. I'm ready for some inspiration and some fresh content in the paranormal world. This just seems like a different kind of paranormal. It's not a ghost show. Here's the second reason why I'm going on and on about this while Yosiell waits patiently here in the parlor. It's because I want to get Tyler Henry on this show. I've just decided it has to happen. I've reached out to him and who I assume is his publicist or manager, and I'm crossing my fingers. I'll probably continue trying too. He's also on Facebook and Twitter, and so feel free, hint, hint, to tweet Tyler and tell him that he really needs to come talk to us paranerds. And as I said in the big Séance parlor on Facebook, if any of my, for sure, West Coast friends have any contacts or influence, we'd love the help in getting Tyler on the show. I just love him. No eye rolls on this show. So let's get to the séance, shall we? I think you're going to like my interview with Yosiell Lorenzo. A little bit later, we'll be joined by Tim Prasil with another Spectral Edition, and then some really great listener feedback that you might find interesting. So it's time for some tea or coffee or the warm beverage of your choice. Just add some Splenda in there for me and we're ready to go. If you've been in the big Séance parlor recently on Facebook, you probably know that recently I gushed over the work of an artist I had just discovered or, creeped through his profile, whatever. He's got a super cool name, and if I simply read what is on his About page from his website, it won't take long for you to realize why I'm finding I resonate with his work and why I think you'll probably dig it too. I'm talking about a spectacular artist named Yosiell Lorenzo. As a young child in the New England area, Yosiell was surrounded with the stories of Salem witches, old colonial haunted houses, and authentic Victorian architecture. His work draws inspiration from these early influences, reflecting the darker elements of the human condition and the mysteries of the supernatural world. Yosiell's work incorporates a variety of textures, often using the palette of earth tones or dark colors. He works in varying mediums, including sculpture, painting, ink, and digital art. Yosiell creates Victorian-era inspired illustrations, along with resin figures called Sicklings. Many of the illustrations are influenced by the Spiritualist movement of the times. Each has the subtle feel of the sepia-toned photos of the 1800s. He has had a solo show every year since 2008, and his paintings and resin sculptures are collected around the world. Additionally, Yosiell makes his presence known in group shows around the country with events in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, and Miami. Recent personal highlights include being a featured artist in the Pixar Times, Juxtapause.com, I hope I'm saying that right, and Hallmark UK. He currently lives and works in Oakland, California, where he has a studio at Fault Line Art Space. Welcome to the parlor, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you. My first artist. I feel like I'm becoming a real podcast now. I'm branching out and getting people from all over different, it's very cool.
It's official. It's getting official.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's just go down the checklist here. You had me, first of all, at haunted houses in your About page. You definitely had me at Victorian architecture. And finally, the Spiritualist movement. As I'm reading this About page, I'm like, yes. And I feel like I've missed out by not knowing about your work before now. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I started that style around 2011, like right after I moved out to the West Coast.
Mm-hmm. Well, to go into this, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I have to tell you what kind of is inspiring some of my questions. Are you ever around middle school children? Are you familiar with the middle school nerd, or you could at least float back to your time as a young teenage nerd and remember those times?
Yes, that I can do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I decided that today, as a part of my research, selfishly for this episode, that me and about 85 of my choir students would check out your site in class and your work, and that we could also fulfill part of our curriculum, which is being able to relate music to other arts. And so we pulled up your site, and I kind of scanned through the photos, and there was lots of discussion, going on around the room as I scrolled through at the different collections. And I heard among, you can just imagine, the middle school vocabulary, but I heard creepy, I heard interesting, cool, all the middle school lingo. Yeah. And I said, if you had the opportunity, because they know about my podcast, if you had the opportunity to interview this artist, what would you ask him? What would you want to know? And the first young lady I called on, as we're looking through some of them, I think they were on, when I asked that, I was on the 2016 list of collections. Mm-hmm. And she said, I would like to know about his childhood.
Oh, wow.
And I laughed so hard, and so I was hoping that you could appreciate that, but they thought it was cool, and it drummed up tons of conversation. So that's going to lead me to my first question. So maybe you could tell us about that, and maybe some of those early New England experiences that helped to form the artist that you are now.
Growing up, a lot has to do with my mom. She was, not so much now, but back then she was really into the supernatural, the occult. She was really into Santero, which is a religion. So she took me to, I guess, what's equivalent to like a spiritualist party in the Victorian era. Mm-hmm. She would take me to these parties, and so I was exposed to a lot of the. So I'll explain the party. So when you get there, there's like people sitting around, and I guess they're waiting there to kind of, they have a question or something. Mm-hmm. They have the person in the center. She's dressed all in white. The guys on the side, and they're playing like gongas and bongos and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then they have the interpreter. And so whatever, I guess, spirit or saint is going through the lady in white, she speaks in this, at the time, I think I was like 10 or 11. So it sounded like an odd language to me. Mm-hmm. And the interpreter would relay the message on to whoever the message belonged to. So there was a lot of that growing up. A lot of talk about, haunted houses, specifically like the Lindley Street haunted house in Bridgeport. That was pretty, I guess, kind of popular. But yeah, all that pretty much stuff just influenced me growing up. my mom handing me TV guides with a highlighter, telling me like highlight all the horror movies so we can watch it together. Yeah, it sounds weird, but yeah, that was definitely up my upbringing, I guess.
Now, did you stick out among your friends in that way? Were you one of the only ones that had that stuff going on? That's kind of cool.
I think it's safe to say anyone in New England, you kind of grew up in that environment. Like it was normal, I guess, pretty prevalent. So it wasn't too weird amongst my friends. Like, oh yeah, like I have a ghost story. I know about this house. So I guess it's kind of common out there versus out here in the West, where I feel like you need to look for it a little more. Where out there is kind of just more in the open.
So where is that kind of go into like the Victorian architecture and that style too? Because I've talked about that so many times. I would love to, just buy this new house and just completely transform it into the Victorian age. I love it. Where does that come from?
That came, from growing up too, you'd see some houses like that back then. I had no idea it was kind of considered Victorian when I was a kid. But doing what I do now, looking back then, I was just like, oh yeah, I can totally see how a lot of those houses on the neighborhood or the block inspired what I'm doing. And then I feel like the Victorian era also had this kind of mystery, kind of darkness to it. So that kind of just, worked even more with what I'm doing or currently doing.
As your bio states, you work with several different mediums and you have several different collections, if that is the correct word.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So tell us about some of your collections, and this might be a great time for listeners, as long as you're not like, driving a car or something, to visit Yosiell's site, and which is JosiellLorenzo.com. And you could also just find it in the show notes, but in case you want to check them out as he's talking about it. So yeah, tell us about some of your collections.
So the first collection I do so I call them orphans, and they're spirit orphan kids, and that's my illustration work, where you can see at JosiellLorenzo.com. That's YOSIELL Lorenzo, and I've been doing that style since 2011. And then my other collection that I do are resin figures called Sicklings, which they're pretty much two separate worlds.
And those are really popular right now, aren't they? Is that kind of your big thing, the Sicklings?
Yeah, I think out of the two, I think so. There's something about something you can pick up and grab and kind of feel and look around versus, 2D where it's kind of just flat. It is what it is for the most part. So people definitely tend to gravitate more to the Sickling world.
They kind of make me think of like Hummel figurines for like a younger and cooler, hipper generation.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. Collectibles or whatnot. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of my Sickling stuff was definitely inspired by like Dark Crystal and the Labyrinth and all the Jim
Oh my
Henson stuff.
Gosh, I was totally going to mention that later on. That's what I feel when I see those.
Oh yeah, well then, yeah, that's a good thing then. Yeah, totally inspired me growing up for sure.
Dark Crystal, nightmares. I don't know if it was just the age that I saw that, but still kind of frightens me, and I don't get frightened too much.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I was definitely into that movie a lot.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So another question from my students, one of the first ones that popped up, they noticed the names that came with many, I guess the orphans, have different names. And so I wondered if there was a story behind the attachment of the names or the different identities of some of those.
No, and I wish there. I wish there was. I think when I'm illustrating, I just step back and kind of just like, yeah, he looks like a Merritt, or Ardley. I think is the only one that pretty much has a story. So Ardley, can't remember the origin, but I think the name means nest or home of love or something like that. So that's why he has the little nest with birds on his head. So yeah, that one I guess kind of has a story, but for the most part they're just looks like a Merritt, looks like a Mildred. So yeah, and actually a little bit. Mildred was inspired by I think Tim Curry was in the show The Worst Witch. It was on HBO. Yeah, many years ago, and it was like Mildred Hubble, and she was like the worst witch. So yeah, she definitely inspired that one, I think.
Animals play a part of many of your pieces too, like with a lot of the orphans. We were noticing today that almost everyone has some kind of an animal or insect or something with that.
I think the creatures that I tend to use, owls. I think owls are pretty mysterious. Black cats. You know, you can never tell what a cat is thinking, that's one reason why I like cats a lot too. Yeah, I think specifically I choose those animals for those reasons. I think I have a couple vultures in some of my illustrations. They're pretty dark.
There's one that looks like a like the ghost of a cat or something is up on their shoulder or something, or the shadow of some kind of animal or horned animal, or maybe it was an owl, since you were talking about owls. That's kind of creepy.
Yes. Yeah, that's just I guess kind of the dark side of the orphans, and they're kind of just like little, I guess, not really orbs, but just like black little, forms that kind of just follow them, keeps them in check.
But we also, the kids noticed really before I did. They were talking about how each year, at least from your site, your main site, you have a different eye. You know, the eyes on your characters are different.
I'm glad someone caught
for
that.
each year. That was one of the first thing, and they thought that was very cool.
So I think when I first started illustrating anything that has, I guess, a solid eye pupil or whatever, they're humans. And I started going more into like the kind of ghostly world, and that's when their eyes change, which is just solid white with like one little dot for the pupil. So in my illustrations, that's how you can tell a spirit between a human. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay, yeah, wow. The kids are super observant. Wow.
I'm telling you, I was really proud of myself after this morning I thought, this is what I need to do. And it was kind of cool, branch out from the music world a little bit and help me with my interview at the same time.
Yeah. No, those are some solid questions.
I could probably guess, but who are some of your influences?
For my illustrations, it's definitely Edward Gorey. Yeah, Edward Gorey was definitely up there. I don't know. He's one of the first ones that comes to mind. He as a kid, do you remember the PBS mystery show?
I watched a lot of PBS. You might have to remind me what the mystery show is.
My sister used to watch the mystery show, and I remember just like casually walking, and I see this black and white illustration of all these like Victorian-esque characters, either in distress or something was going on. And come to find out, it was Edward Gorey did the little intro for that show, and that 2-3 minute intro just stayed with me as a child, and till this day. So yeah, he's definitely one of my biggest inspirations. And then for my 3D stuff, yeah, like I mentioned, anything Jim Henson, Dark Crystal, all that stuff really just creating these full fledged worlds.
And I have as a teacher, I have a few art teacher friends too, and I talked to a few of them in the last couple of days as I got excited and was telling them about this interview. And, they checked out your site. And one of the questions I got from them was, how do you determine what's going to be like an ink creation or digital or a painting or even into your figurines? Like, does anything start on paper and then decide it's going to be like a figurine? Or how do you determine how that's going to produce itself?
I think for anything, so I used to paint, but I think doing the 3, I felt like I was just spreading myself too thin. Mm-hmm. So I kind of gave up painting. Well, not fully gave up, but as far as 2D painting, it was about 2 years ago. So anything that's, I guess, human or related to the orphan world, I keep it as 2D. And anything that's more just based on the sickling world I keep that 3D and just build that world out. And then a lot of my illustrations, not a lot, but for the most part, a lot of them, if there's like a line I hear in a song that catches my eye, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a cool illustration. That usually inspires a lot of my 2D stuff as well.
So you definitely keep a lot of your collections kind of in their own little worlds then.
Yeah. There's not too many orphan sickling mashups going on. They know their
mashup. That's perfect.
Yeah, they know where they belong.
What does your artistic process look like, and what kind of routine or creative rituals do you undertake in the creation of your pieces?
I don't think I have rituals.
It's such a mysterious word that sometimes you hear ritual and you're like, wow, ritual.
Wow. No, I wish I did just for that word.
That's like those parties that you went to.
Yeah, no, I wish I could say like, yeah, I don't pray or anything like that. I just
Do you light a candle at least or anything like that?
As we speak, a candle is lit. But
That's cool.
Candles usually lit. I usually light a lot of incense. I guess that can be kind of ritual.
Yeah.
No, as far as rituals, no, not really. I just pretty much get down to
jump to it.
Yeah. As far as process, my illustrations, I always start off as sketches, drawings, and then I just trace over them 5-6 times until I actually get like the proportions right. Mm-hmm. And then I scan that, and then I actually do all the cross hatching digitally with a tablet.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then the 3D stuff, I start a master with monster clay. I create a mold from the master, and then everything else is cast out of resin. And I try to keep everything limited edition for the 3D stuff for the most part.
You're listening to the Big Séance podcast with Patrick Keller. Look for us on iTunes and be sure to check out bigseance.com for more discussion.
So we'll get right back to Yosiell in just a few minutes. Right now, let's once again welcome Tim Prasil, this time for a story about a house made of headstones. Certainly curious about this one. You're on, Tim.
Thank you, Patrick. Welcome to Spectral Edition, in which I read actual ghost reports published in U.S. newspapers between the years of 1865 and 1918. Occasionally, I read one of these old ghost reports, and I'm not sure who to be more afraid of, the ghosts or the ones who are still alive. I think you'll see what I mean. This one was published in August 16th of 1902. The headline is Indiana Farmers Excited Over a Haunted House, haunted in quotes. Citizens afraid to enter building erected with foundation made of tombstones. Republic Special. Vincennes, Indiana, August 15th. George Flowers, a prominent young farmer, bought a strip of land at Sand Ridge near here on which was located the oldest cemetery in this section. The cemetery was surrounded by a grove and contained 200 headstones. Flowers removed the headstones, throwing some of them into the Embarrass River, and with the rest built a foundation for his home. The cemetery he plowed up and planted in it melons and potatoes. Although similar crops on the rest of the farm grew in abundance, the cemetery crop has been eaten by a strange bug. Flowers' house is now said to be haunted. For several nights past, the building is said to have shaken violently. Flowers, his wife, and 2 children are distracted with fear and have fled from the place. People having relatives buried there have taken the matter up and threatened to prosecute Flowers for obtaining the graves without giving them notice so they could have reinterred the dead. The grand jury of Lawrence County is investigating the case and may indict Flowers. Flowers' brother and sister and 2 of his children lie buried in the divested cemetery. Flowers secured the money from his father, Frank Flowers, in Colorado Springs to buy the farm. The neighbors dare not harbor the family. The father seems to be impelled by some irresistible force to visit the haunted farm daily, only to flee again with increased fear. Today, lightning struck the barn on the Flowers place and burned the stock and the building. The place is in an unfrequented portion of the county, and the little settlement in the vicinity is greatly excited over the case. I can well understand that.
You've been listening to Spectral Edition. I'm Tim Prasil, and I have more than 200 of these articles. I post another one each Wednesday on my new website, The Merry Ghost Hunter, MERRY Ghost Hunter. I hope you stop by.
I wanted to take some time to thank a listener who wrote a glowing review in the U.S. iTunes store. And inside this review, I think I may have been given a major show idea. This review is written by Megiloth. I think that's how you would say it, Megiloth. And Megiloth says, great show. I'm enjoying this podcast and the varied topics of discussion. Ouija, tarot, or psychics don't impress me, but EVP does. I have gotten quite a few good ones from places like the Stanley Hotel, Villisca Axe Murder House, and Lemp Mansion. Speaking of Lemp Mansion, it sounds like Patrick is from St. Louis, so I think he should stay at Lemp a couple of nights and tell us about his experience. My wife and I were there a few years ago and were alone during our overnight stay. We heard glasses or bottles clinking in the bar, silverware moving in the atrium dining room, nasty smell in the William Lemp Sr. suite that disappeared. The best experience was when we were in the upstairs sitting area and heard voices coming from behind the closed door of either the Frederick or Louis Lemp suite, whichever one is on the right, the north side. We opened the door and voices stopped. That was strange. Would like Patrick's take on Lemp Mansion and if he has ever stayed there. Keep up the good work on the podcast. Well, this is me again. I have been to the Lemp Mansion. I definitely love it for its style and beauty for sure. And it has a spooky and kind of depressing history, actually. I haven't stayed overnight yet, but I've wanted to for a long time. I did go with the group a few years back to tour it and take some photos. I had people around me saying they felt things, and whether they did or not, I'm not sure. I'm assuming they didn't lie. But you know how I am with that. I don't tend to really pick up those things. Or if I do, I'm usually very skeptic about those things. I've spent the night at some supposedly incredibly haunted places and slept like a baby. But I've always wanted to stay there. So I'm considering staying there soon. And I'm considering doing it on purpose by myself. So we'll see about that. Before I got my Canon, when I went a few years ago, I got permission to go through the rooms of the mansion on my own to take quite a few photos, which I think turned out great for one of the early iPhones. And I'll link to that blog post with the photos in the show notes if anyone would like to check those out. So thanks for the suggestion and the feedback, Megiloth. Do you have any suggestions or ideas? I would love for you to let me know. Hint, hint, I would really love for you to send me some audio feedback. I would love that, and I can get your voice in the show. All right, let's get back to the conclusion of my conversation with Yosiell Lorenzo.
Thanks for joining us for the Big Séance podcast. We'd better get back to the table while there's still some candlelight left.
I've seen that you have a lot of fans, and you know you've got fans that have come to talk to you like on video, and you can see some of those things on YouTube. Do you have a good idea of like what the avatar of your fan and your followers are? Like, who are your biggest nerd followers?
No, I feel like everything's pretty much, I mean, sometimes you'll have one follower who just collects everything I do.
Yeah.
But I feel like for the most part, it comes in like in spurts. Like you'll have someone who's like super into your stuff, and then that kind of fizzles out. And then as that one fizzles out, someone else comes and takes their place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of just like a roller coaster for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am curious though, because when we look at your work, I see
a sadness.
You know what? I
brought it up. Yeah.
I see coolness, but no, I see illustrations in books. Have you illustrated books from other people?
No, I haven't. And I wouldn't be against it. For instance, I had this lady, and she's like, "Hey, she sent me like I guess part of her book, and she was like, I was wondering if you'd be interested in illustrating the cover." And I read it and I wasn't that into it. So I don't know what I told her, but I was just like, no, I think I'm just, too busy. I kind of just, let her down, slowly.
Because you have to really resonate with it, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I have to be super into it. Of its spot illustrations, I think I wouldn't mind. But if it's something where the character is jumping or running and now ducking, that kind of stuff, then I think that gets a little too redundant. So I try to just hit people with the one-offs and,
So I'm not ever really into the art world a lot, but is it kind of work the same for like commissions? Do you do commissioned work or anything?
Yeah. So you pretty much have to figure out multiple streams of income. So I have commissions, gallery shows, online releases, and then the conventions that I do. So that's 4. And that's pretty much, I think, yeah. And if anything else comes my way,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think of, I tried to relate it to composers, every now and then when groups or schools will have, pieces commissioned and I wondered if it was kind of the same process for that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've gotten commissions for stuff that I just never got around to them, but people are just like, oh, can you do a commission of, I think her name is Audrey from Twin Peaks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, for the most part, yeah, not too many commissions, just the other 3, I guess.
What's Halloween like for you?
Magical. Honestly, Halloween, and that's the only holiday I really need.
Oh gosh, I love that.
It's I'll take it over Christmas any day. The gifts are cool, but I don't know. And especially growing up in New England, like, man, October and November is just magical out there. Like, the leaves are turning, the air is like crisp. There's like an overcast with a contrast between the leaves. It's just, it's magical. But yeah, Halloween for me is, I try to make it a big deal. We get lots of kids on the neighborhoods too. So
yeah,
we decorate the house. We created like a pumpkin king. So it's like this really giant scarecrow looking guy, carved out the pumpkin, fake pumpkin, of course. So yeah, no, we try to go all out. You mentioned something about you create like an altar, like a Victorian inspired altar.
Oh yeah, like I call it my Halloween altar, and it's definitely nothing as cool that would be in your house. But I always try to give that kind of Victorian feel and old photos and candles and
yeah, totally. Yeah. So we tried that this past Halloween, so I think it's gonna be a must have from here on in. But
oh yeah, it's definitely a tradition for me.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, Halloween is amazing.
Is it like a month-long kind of list of do you have your checklist of different traditions and things you have to do? That's kind of what I've started the last several years. I'm like, okay, it's October 1st, so this week we're going to do this. Next week we're grabbing the pumpkins. Next week,
Oh, yeah, pumpkin picking definitely happens. But I mean, I don't know. It's just different out here in the West Coast when it's the fall and it's like sunny and 80 degrees. You know what I mean? It's just like, I guess it's Halloween. So, probably more so back when I lived in the East Coast, but the West Coast, I think pumpkin picking is one of the few things I still must do for the holidays.
Do you miss that East Coast fall?
I do. So I was going there once every year, now once every 2 years because my schedule's getting a bit busy. Mm-hmm. And I always try to make sure it's in October so I can catch some of that fall.
Oh, yeah. I don't know that I would be able to do it. Like there would be many things that would be cool about moving somewhere that doesn't have this, I'm in Missouri, so something opposite of this. And I don't think I could do it. I do need all of the changes of the seasons. Like summer is not my favorite as a season, but I think I probably still need the change. Like I just need to experience that. Mm-hmm. But man, once the, like the locusts and everything start like late summer, I'm like, okay, here we go. And then once the leaves start, changing or falling, and then I start finding all my cemeteries and I'm just like, oh, and once it gets to winter, I kind of mourn the loss of fall, but I like winter for its own purposes. But
yeah, winter. I don't miss shoveling my car out of snow or slipping and sliding all over the place. But I mean, the first like snowfall and like when the snow is really clean, I think it's also it's beautiful, I guess. But it gets a little tricky trying to feel the fall out here. But I think the move was mainly due to take my art a little more serious and kind of just next level it up. So
yeah, because there's a lot going on out there.
Yeah, there is. I felt like I kind of plateaued in Connecticut. I had like what I think it was the biggest show I could have. And I said, all right, it's either I'm going to get tired of doing the same old here or go out and, go to the West Coast and kind of just take this a little more serious, which was amazing because it was, I think that's when my art got a little darker. And it's also just, getting out of my comfort zone and just feast or famine, really pushing yourself out there.
If you could go back in time to any year and, I don't know why I always think of a home when I think of Victorian time, but if you could have the home or the studio of your dreams from that time, what would it look like? And what year would that be, you think?
Oh, it would be in the 1800s and Patrick, this will happen.
Can I move in then, please?
Yeah. No, I always imagined my studio being one of those like where you go down this like dark stairway and you pull one of the books on a library or something.
Oh, shut up! And the wall moves and opens up.
Exactly, and then the bookcase kind of slides to the left or the right, and then there's like my working studio. That is the goal.
Wow.
Eventually someday, but yeah, I always think about that day. Sometime it will happen.
And that kind of old book smell. You need that, even if I have to pump it in artificially or something.
yeah. So,
mildewed books.
Yeah, and the way I have my studio set up now, it's close to that. Like I have one of those antique lawyer stacking bookcases with the glass fronts that kind of slide up. I have an old school desk that I use as my regular desk from like 1913 or something like that. And some old Victorian inspired lamps. So it's close enough. I feel like my studio needs to kind of inspire me. And I feel like when I walk in, I'm just like this other era.
Mm-hmm. To just transform you and take you back into whatever mode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's why I really don't have any ritual. Like actually, now that you think about it, I think the ritual is just coming to the studio and this little environment. Yeah. Full circle, Patrick. It happened.
So what's coming up is either as far as like creations that you have coming up that are maybe new or where you're going, if you have some shows coming up?
Everything's kind of still new to me. I made the leap to full-time art last year, June. So I'm kind of just feeling things out, doing a lot of conventions. But, as far as there's two things I'm super excited for, and the month of May I'm taking off so I can focus on doing the Major Arcana Tarot deck.
Shut up. Are you doing that?
Yeah. So I want to do the 22 cards for, in the Orphan style that I have for my illustrations.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait for that.
Yeah. So I'm going to hunker down and get that done, the whole month of May, probably a little over, and then eventually kickstart it in late fall. And then in June, I'm collaborating with, two of my friends, and we're going to do a Ouija board based off the Orphan illustrations.
Do you have an idea of how many paranerds right now are freaking out with excitement about both of those things that you just said right there?
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. So they go by Findies and they do all these custom Ouija boards. So I asked her one day, I'm just like, hey, would you like to collaborate and do, Ouija board based on my illustrations? And she was super excited about it. So, yeah, it'll just be, that whole nice earthy dark wood with the black ink. And then, my kids kind of just playing around the orphans playing around the deck, the board. So yeah, I still have to flesh some things out, but yeah, those two things are definitely happening.
Well, that's exciting. And speaking of those things, we should go here. Like, do you use spirit communication tools every now and then? Like, what's your experience with either?
No, I haven't. Like, even when my mom, before she became born again, she was interested in stuff, and she used to get her tarot read probably like once a month. Mm. But she always kind of just, and I'm pretty sure you've had a lot of this on your show too, like stay away from the spirit board. You might get something that you regret later or something like that. So for the most part, no, I never really, I never sat down and kind of had a session.
Do you see that happening in your future? Or is it just not an interest?
I think I want to. Like if I ever stumble into a situation, I'm just like, yeah, it feels right. Let's give it a shot. I think I would.
Yeah.
But as of right now, no, I don't think so.
And you're plenty busy. You have things going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I totally wouldn't say no, but yeah, no plans anytime soon.
Well, as a listener of the podcast, you had to know this was coming, probably. What kind of nerd outside of the art world, outside of anything we've talked about, what kind of nerd are you? Ready, go.
I have so I have two. I'm really into soundtracks. So when I go into movies, so I'll go to theaters. I mean, obviously go watch movies in theaters, but I'll look at the movie at the same time I'm kind of analyzing the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. And so I get really into that. And I buy a lot of soundtrack.
Like the film score of the
the film score. If I like it, I'll buy the vinyl of it, not the CD or the digital. I need the something about it. So I definitely nerd out on soundtrack vinyls. And I also make soap. Yes.
Shut up. Like what kind?
My partner and I make soap. So it's homemade soap, organic essential oils, and we call it Pssstology, which is the reading of tea leaves. So there's a whole divination thing going on too.
Oh my gosh, there's this new shop kind of near here that I just went to recently, and I've never really been into the whole crafty soaps. And I've tried some just recently, and they also made, I guess people are calling them bath bombs now.
Oh, okay,
that you just drop them in, and I'm like, that's kind of cool. The smell is just awesome.
Mm-hmm. It gets all fizzy. Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. So we sometimes do that on the weekends once in a while. My schedule's pretty busy, but it's kind of just good to do something that's not so, our end deadline related. So it's like, let's try some soap.
I have to think that that's probably similar to making candles. Is it not? Probably. Maybe? Do you ever do that?
Well, no, we haven't done candles. We were thinking about doing it, but we do the cold process soap. So that's like the lye and the water mixture, but we use tea and then just all the oils. And so it's not the melt and pour kind. So I guess if we did melt and pour, probably would be similar to candle making.
Awesome, you big nerd.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we walk through craft shops all the time, and we're just like, check out these soaps. So I was just like, let's just make it. So. Yeah.
Well,
soap and soundtracks.
There you go. At the same time, even. Yeah. Where'd you go to learn how to do the soaps?
We went to this place. I think there's no longer there, but it was this small place called Nova Studio up in. It's like 20 minutes north from where we live, and we went there. Took like a crash course, and started making soap. What
is your best advice for young or aspiring artists?
Don't stop. I mean, it sounds easy, but when things get crazy, you're like, this is not working out. The last thing I think you want to do is stop. Just continue pushing on and just don't stop creating. Don't stop making.
How old were you when art kind of really entered your life? Can you pinpoint?
It was always as a kid. I think, it sounds cliche, but I was like the artist pretty much all through, elementary school. And like, that's Yosiell, he draws. But it wasn't until after I graduated from college that I started taking it a little bit more serious. Like, you can actually make a living off of this. Because I have a degree in graphic design, and I did that for 15 years before doing what I'm doing now.
So I want to thank you so much I am so glad that I guess this is a little behind the scenes because Yosiell requested to join the Big Séance Parlor. And that's how I found his artwork. So I'm so glad you did. And this has been really cool. And I think I have a new, I don't follow many artists, so I have an artist to follow. And, nice. I hope you gain some more Paranerd followers. I guess why don't you go ahead and we talked about the website, but how can people get connected with you? Where do you like to hang, as far as like social media, if you do any of that, or how can people follow you?
I think, you can visit the websites, but I think I'm most active on Instagram, which is just at my first name, Yosiell, Yosiell. And there you can catch postings of my shows, behind the scene works, up and coming stuff. So, Instagram, That's my choice. My choice of social media.
That's where it's at.
Yeah.
You rock, man. Thank you for coming on and talking to us.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigséance.com. Just click on the Big Séance Podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and we've just been added to the Google Play Music Store. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigséance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line at 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigséance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.